Like, I think some people have this idea of like, oh, here's what kids are gonna think is cool, or like, here's what's wrong with kids' TV, and here's why I'm gonna make it better. And a lot of it is like ignoring what's like developmentally gonna help a kid connect to something.
Bonjour, welcome to Wide Walls, a podcast where inspiring educators, researchers, designers, and innovators share their personal journey and their vision for creating better learning experiences for children. My name is Mathieu Penaud. I am a product manager and learning experience designer, and I am passionate about the role of design and technology in education and learning, and the humans behind it. If you find this episode insightful, share it with your friends and colleagues and give us some stars on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you very much for your support and for being part of the conversation. And now, let's welcome our guest. Welcome everyone. Get ready for a very special episode today because my guest is none other than the amazing Ciarrocchi. Callie is a writer, host, and producer for some of the most exciting TV shows and podcasts for kids. You may have seen her in Sunny Side Up, Snug's House, the Big Fun Crafty Show on Universal Kids, and Weird But True on Disney Plus for National Geographic, for which she earned an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Daytime Program Host. She's also the writer, producer, and host of hilarious podcasts like Hey Story Go and Don't Break the Rules on Pinna, and Who, When, Wow with TinkerCast. Callie is also deeply involved in educational initiatives, collaborating with organizations like Sesame Workshop and the Lego Foundation, for which she served as host and director of their online course called Coping with Change: Social Emotional Learning Through Play. She also works directly with schools and educators to provide resources and facilitate creativity workshops. Callie is a singer, maker, event speaker, TV writer, ukulele player, stage actor, storyteller, entertainer, commercial voiceover, preschool teacher. What can't she do? Maybe we'll find out today as we dive into Callie's personal journey, her thoughts on the intersection between education and entertainment, and the importance of learning through play. Callie, I'm incredibly grateful and excited to have this conversation with you today. Welcome to the show.
Oh my God. I'm just gonna have you introduce me for the rest of my life. It's just gonna be, he's gonna go first and then I'll come out. And also that at the end there made me laugh. It's just like, that is a person that does too many things, is what that is.
Every one of them is true, right?
Yes, every one of them is true. And well, there was one thing I realized. I am the creator, host, writer, producer for Hey Story Go, but I only hosted the other ones. I don't think I wrote for the other podcasts. No, I didn't. So I don't want to take that credit away from them. But thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm such a big fan. So here we are.
Well, that makes two of us then. And I will start with some questions. The idea is to get a very fast answer, the first one that comes to mind,
Okay,
and let's see what we get. So, where did you grow up?
Delaware.
And where do you live now?
I live in Brooklyn, New York.
Nice. And what was your favorite game as a kid?
I really liked imagination games, so we would do a lot of pretending to be detectives with a detective agency and like solving mysteries. I would say that.
Ooh, nice. I like that. And what was your favorite TV show as a kid?
Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? It was a TV show where it was like a reality show, and the kids who were like obsessed with geography, like nerdy kids like me, would like do a bunch of questions and trivia and stuff to try to find Carmen Sandiego. Like you got a mission from the chief detective, and then you had to like figure out where Carmen Sandiego was in the world. Thus, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? I was obsessed.
That sounds fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see you're into detective things.
I can't stop with the detective stuff, and it really did start with Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. When I was 8 years old, I hosted an episode of it in my basement for my family, and I think it was like that solidified my destiny.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Who was your favorite teacher?
Who is my favorite teacher? I mean, I feel I've had a lot of teachers that I've really loved. I think at school, my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Carter, let me skip nap and like hang out and like help in the classroom instead of taking a nap. And I'm obsessed with the fact that she did that because I felt so like seen because I just wanted to help. So Mrs. Carter, I think, in other ways too, but that specific thing, like, well, she had my back.
Lovely. Lovely. What is one thing that all kids should learn at school?
How to play.
All right. And what is one thing that all adults should learn at work?
How to play.
Somehow I was expecting it.
You knew.
Love it. Can you tell us a little more about? Well, actually, you know what? We're gonna get into that more in our discussion. So let's keep that for later.
Okay.
What is the skill you're the most proud of?
Parallel parking. I'm such a good parallel parker, but like sort of useful skills. I'm proud of being a host. I like hosting and I like doing it. And I'm proud of the work I've done to like try to get better at it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what is the creation that you're the most proud of? Something you made.
Tube down.
Tube down. Oh, Tube down.
We'll
Okay,
talk more
awesome.
about that, I know.
All right, and we'll talk more about Tube Town a little later for people who are not familiar yet with this project of yours.
Yeah.
What book are you currently reading?
Ooh. Okay, yes. I both read and listen to audiobooks a lot, and I have a few things going, but the thing that's beside my bed right now is The Way Forward by Young Pueblo, which is like essays and poems about moving forward in life. Yeah.
Nice. And what is your favorite word?
My favorite word?
Yes.
Wow. What a wonderful question. My favorite word. The first thing that comes to mind is collaborate. I don't know. Yeah, I'll just go with that.
Nice. Okay. That works. All right. And last two questions.
Okay.
What is the latest thing you did for work?
The latest thing I did for work I had a recording session on Monday. The sort of last thing of interest is that on Monday I did a big recording session for one of the podcasts I host, Who, When, Wow, Mystery Edition. And we bang out usually 6 episodes in one recording. So it's about 5 hours. That was on Monday and it was so much fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Must be a little tiring too. 5 hours of.
Kind
podcast
of,
hour.
but it's so energizing because I think the show is so well written. And so it's just fun to read.
Awesome. And what is the latest thing you did to relax?
I took a nap this afternoon.
Nice.
Yeah,
Naps are much needed sometimes.
100%. Very important. I'm a good nap.
Yeah, very much underestimated as well. I wish they were more valued.
Agreed.
Well, thank you so much for answering all these questions. And I'd love, so when I presented you and shared like some of the things that you do, was that long list of great things that you're good at, and you say, that sounds like it's too much. And I'm wondering, it's interesting comment. I'm wondering, when you look back at your journey from where you started to where you're at now, what do you think of this journey? How do you feel?
Yeah. I mean, I joked like, oh, there's too many things, but I feel so grateful. I feel so grateful that I get to do so many different types of things. I really feel like in my heart of hearts, I'm a multi-hyphenate. I like doing different types of things. And even like I spent 6 years as a full-time employee of NBC Universal hosting Sunny Side Up, which was the live preschool morning show that I did. So during my time at Sunny Side Up, every single week was totally different because we were making a brand new live show every week. And so I was working as a host, as a writer, as a researcher, as like a songwriter every single day. And I did that for 6 years. And I remember thinking, this is probably the only full-time job I could have that would be satisfying because it was so dynamic. And so now I'm freelance and I noticed that my life it's still like I like to hit all the buckets. So I like to sometimes be just a performer. Sometimes I like to be a performer and producer. Sometimes I like to be just a writer. And there's a real like privilege in being able to somehow like make a living doing all types of different things. And also some of it's just like the flow of the kind of work that's available. Like the beginning of 2022, I had a ton of work as a producer for television, and I wasn't doing anything where I was talent. And then right now, I'm doing a lot of stuff where I'm being used as talent or as a performer. And like 2.5 years ago, I was every contract was like a facilitator for Lego, for a company, for TinkerCast, the company that makes one of my podcasts that I host. So for me, it's like on its best days, it means I'm always working with new people who fire up my imagination, and I get to wear different hats that make me feel like energized. And on its worst day, it is a little bit of like, where's the next paycheck coming from? But like, if that's the worst of it, the like kind of strategizing, the stability, I'm getting better at that, and then just like figuring out a way to get to keep living this life of like making and playing with people I admired to,
Hmm.
offer stuff to the world that is meaningful.
Awesome. And I'm very curious about the skills that you need for those different activities, because when you're like producing, writing, hosting, those are very different. It requires very different skills. And how do you train to have these different skills?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so nonlinear in media. I feel like there are so many different ways to wear the hats that people wear. As a performer, like pretty much like that's been the clearest path of like going to theater school and training as an improviser, training in physical theater, training as a clown, like all these different things, and then being a teacher and working in early childhood education, like all that rolling together makes me feel confident as a host and performer for kids. And like as a performer in general, like that training's been pretty clear. But when I got hired to host Sunny Side Up, which is the preschool show that was like my entrance into children's media, when I was interviewing for the job and like auditioning, I didn't realize that we would also be producing the show too, that we'd be working with our puppeteer. Basically, the show is it's not on anymore, but there was a hosting team of 4 human hosts. The distinction is important because then there was the co-host was the chicken puppet, and so there were 4 puppeteers who were also producers, and we'd be paired up in teams, and you'd like rotate through who you were working with to create all the content for the show every week. So I sort of fell into this 5-year experience. The sixth year that I worked at the company, we had a different show, Snug's House. But for the 5 years that it was Sunny Side Up, I was learning how to make television. So we would, because the show was an interstitial program that came on in between every show that aired on Sprout from 9 to noon, we would watch all the different shows that were going to air during the block, and then we would write content that was super hyper specific to each show. So if there was going to be an episode of Barney on at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, after the episode, if they were like flying kites in that episode, then maybe afterwards there'd be like a 3-minute segment with me and the chicken puppet showing people how to make kites from stuff from around the house. So it's a really specific type of television producing and writing, like writing playable, interactive, short segments for a human and a puppet for a preschool audience, but like thinking through every element of like, what are the props that we need? Is there an original song? Okay, let's get that track produced. Who do we have to communicate to? It was like such an amazing training ground for producing. And even though I don't work in live television anymore, I've been able to like extrapolate those skills. I mean, every single television show is its own complete spaceship with its own rules and its own materials and its own like system. So for producing, every project is just about like learning, okay, how are we going to execute a vision here together? And I feel like writing, I wrote for Sunny Side Up, I wrote for Snug's House, and then I kept putting feelers out after my contract with NBC ended in 2018 for more writing work. And, I spent like a year in 2018 just having meetings with like anyone on the planet. And through those meetings, I got a freelance opportunity to write a script for Esme and Roy, which is a Sesame Workshop show. And they held my hand really nicely for my first type of writing like that. I wrote from an outline, and they gave me a ton of stuff to read before, and the curriculum is so clear and so strong, and preschool writing is pretty like formulaic, so that was really helpful. And I also spent that year in 2018 kind of, because I was like, what is my next job going to be, watching a lot of kids television and writing out the structure. I call it study hall. So that's sort of how I approach any new skill that I want to learn. I kind of just dive into like, all right, how am I going to figure this out? And then I never took any writing classes, but that might have been a next step. So yeah, I think that kind of covers sort of training in a few different directions.
Mm, I see. It's like learning by doing
Yeah.
and receiving the mentorship and help
Yep.
as you're going through
Yeah,
the motion.
and also like figuring out what I like what is my taste, who do I admire, and like getting closer to them, even if it's just by like listening to podcasts that they've been on, or like when I was trying to figure out the writing thing, it's like what shows do I admire the writing? Can I get my hands on a script? Can I look at it? Can I try to write a script for that show? And in the end, and this is something interesting, I think, about freelancing and having a lot of skills. I have learned over the last couple years that there are certain types of writing that I like to do and certain types of writing that I don't like to do. So I've pulled back from a TV and podcast writing for right now, and I'm writing a detective novel, which like I guess isn't a surprise in some ways, but it's a middle grade detective novel. But I think there's something else about freelance and multi hyphenate where you have to like stay tuned in to what's working. And I think part of working with all these different skills is like being realistic about the fact that not everything is always like going to serve me or feel good, or and again, there's privilege in that, being able to decide sometimes which kind of project I want to take and which kind of hat that I want to wear. And sometimes I burn out on certain hats, but I'm also like giving myself permission to like retire hats if I need to.
Hmm.
So, like, after I did
Yeah.
2 back-to-back television producer experiences, one was on location for 4 months in Texas, and the other was in LA, and after those 6 months, I was like, "I need a long break from TV producing because it was just, like, so intense.
Hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it gives you that flexibility of choosing where to work, when, and uh,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
kind of keep you having like that energy because you're working on different things at different time, and so
Yeah,
it feels like
exactly.
something new every time. Yeah, I like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, what did like being a teacher, a kindergarten teacher, what did it teach you that is still valuable for you in what you do today?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I taught at an early childhood education center, my first 4 years out of college, called Bubbles Academy in Chicago, and it is totally the foundation for like everything else I've done since, because I think I learned so much being in the classroom every day with preschoolers, with like it was zero to 5 in that space, and then I was also just working with other ages at that time in my life in other capacities, but specifically the Early Childhood Education Center is where I was writing a lot of songs and kind of writing different activities and segments and kind of feeling into what works and what doesn't, and also like kind of breaking through that first level of like, here's what I think that kids are going to want to do, or here's the kind of music I think they're going to want to hear, and here's where I'm completely wrong, and they're going to teach me, they're going to show me what they want to hear, and what works and what doesn't.
Mm,
Like I started in my early 20s, I was playing guitar at Whole Foods every Thursday for like a half an hour as like a set of music that parents could come and sit with their kid and then go do their shopping. And my first like 2 or 3 weeks of the job, I had like Beatles covers, and like I wanted to do like cool music, and the kids were just like so not interested. They were like climbing the mic stand and like ripping the guitar out of my hands. But when I was like, all right, let me do some like kids music, like I started playing Lori Berkner and different kids' music. And like Lori Berkner in particular, her music is just so incredible for preschoolers because it invites them to stand up, to stomp, to pause, to like be imaginative. And as soon as I started playing that kind of music, and even if I did like a top 40, like I used to close with Baby by Justin Bieber, I still had to like make it interactive in some way if I was going to keep their attention.
mm,
So that I think really understanding like what it means to keep preschoolers engaged, that is directly translated to my work on Sunny Side Up, which the sort of tone of that is similar to a Blues Clues, where we were talking straight to camera and asking kids questions and leaving a beat for a response. And that there is such an art to that. I see so many people like, Blues Clues is such an iconic example of the thing done right, but there is like a correct time to take something out to kids, like the kind of like inclusive questioning. You can't just say to at any sentence like, "Oh, we're gonna play with paint. Have you ever played with paint before? What's your favorite color of paint? Do you like paint?" Like, there's a really natural time and place to be like, we're playing with paint right now, and here's like, just put it on my piece of paper. You see that? You see all those colors? Yeah. Like there's
Mm.
moments where they'll lean in, and the pacing of that and how much time you give and what particular questions you offer out. I had already had those in my body from teaching, so that when I got to the Sunny Side Up job, even though they gave me training, I remember at one point they were like, "I bet this is gonna seem really weird to you." And I was like, "Actually, no, I already like I just did this for 4 years."
Mm.
So it really teaching in that way really set the stage for everything else. And coming up with really we did a lot of birthday parties at the space in, Bubbles Academy, and we did a lot of, like, coming up with really interactive ways to explore things that kids were interested in, whether it was, like, something as kind of generic as, like, superheroes or pirates or something more specific to whatever the kid was obsessed with. It was really fun to, like, design these experiences for the kids, and I feel like all of that was just, like, such helpful training.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine. And I'm wondering because when you do that as a teacher, you have, or when you're like doing those live events, you have the immediate feedback from the kids. You have their reactions, and you can kind of like adapt your pace to that. And I'm wondering when you do TV and you don't have that feedback, like how do you walk through that?
Ugh, such a good question, and like such a real thing that was hard for me when I first started on Sunny Side Up, and I felt so grateful for the 4 years in the classroom. Like I would just like imagine the kids in my classes, or like I felt like I had logged so many hours in front of real kids, and I had been a teaching artist in Chicago working with like school age kids, and I was a DJ with Radio Disney. Like I had been the 4 years leading up to starting on kids television, I was spending almost every day in front of groups of kids. So it was like really in my bones, like here's how to talk to them and not lose them. And then after we started, we would sometimes do live events, which were really helpful because it was a nice way to remember and like kind of like keep us honest, like not to get too far ahead pacing wise or too complex. And I'll say that like, I mean, even it's like to go from like having an audience to not having an audience, but still being live felt like there was this like immediate energy of like kids would send us messages through our website during the show, which now feels like such an old timey way to
Mm.
do something. But it was this way to kind of feel their engagement. So then after that, when I would do, and the Big Fun Crafty Show, we had obviously real kids participating. It was an arts and crafts reality TV show. So that was super fun that the kids were on set every day. But for something like Weird But True, it was hard to like not, and that's like not a show that has an audience in front of you where you're even like pretending. But like I'll say that I think sometimes with kids television, different people that I've worked with, like I can kind of tell when someone has actually spent like real time with lots of kids and when they haven't. Like I think some people have this idea of like, oh, here's what kids are going to think is cool, or like here's what's wrong with kids TV and here's why I'm going to make it better. And a lot of it is like ignoring what's like developmentally going to help a kid connect to something. Like there is a certain pacing, there is a scaffolding of language that you have to have at the base of something, or else like you're not going to have they're going to be gone. Like you still want to be able to like make it
Mm.
accessible as you're making it cool and fresh and fun and all these things. So yeah, I think like making sure that I was getting in front of real kids throughout the years that I was working on television was an important way for me to like stay tethered to the actual feeling and to not accidentally escape into like what I think is going to be funny and weird. A lot of times though, it is the same thing. What I think is going to be funny and weird and what they think is going to be funny and weird.
You talked about like birthday party and live events for like kids where you can adapt to something they're really into. You
Yes.
mentioned like parades or things like this. For like much larger shows or larger audience,
Yeah.
how do you create a content that is going to be relevant or meaningful to that vast audience and the all the kids that are going to be watching or
Yeah.
listening?
I mean, it's tricky. I guess Sunny Side Up was something that was very broad in terms of like the show had themed weeks, but it's like you could kind of meet it from wherever you are, from a variety of ages. And so I think we did a good job a lot of the time in making something that could meet a couple different age levels. So I guess that's maybe the key. That's like what I think the answer to that question is like making things that can operate from like have a way in for multiple age levels. So sometimes that means like not as much specific curriculum goal, but something that like scaffolds in a way that it's going to catch everybody. So I'm thinking like the mystery show Who When Wow for TinkerCast is something that's definitely meant for older kids, but I know that a friend of mine, they listen with their 4-year-old and their 7-year-old. And it's like that show is not for 4-year-olds, but there's like nothing in
Mm.
it that's going to be too scary or too weird. And like the pacing is like enough, like quick enough that I think the 4-year-old can like be, rhythmically with it. And there's some like crazy characters that are really silly. So like there's sort of like something for that younger crowd, even if they can't totally catch the dimensions of the mystery, although I think that they can. And like that show I think can play up to like 11 or 12 because it's got like real mysteries at the center of it, so it's giving them something that they can like go Google later to be like, wait, is that what really happened? So that's something that's like can play with for a lot of ages, and it's accessible because it's, you can get it wherever you listen to podcasts on, Apple Podcasts or whatever. Where Sunny Side Up, it's like, okay, you've got only the people that have the channel Sprout, so that's how big that audience is. You have the people that are home during the day because it's on from 9 to noon, so that's preschoolers that are home with a parent. And like, how do we grab the 2s and the 5s, and maybe there's an older sibling in their room and they're paying attention too, but we're not actually interested in grabbing the parents always on Sunny Side Up. Like, we know they're watching, but
Mhm.
we're a little more focused on like caring for the kids. Whereas Who When Wow, because it's a podcast, people are listening in the car, so we know the parents are listening. So we are hoping to make that something that the parents are going to like to listen to also. Does that
Hmm.
answer the question, or am I all over the place? Be honest.
That answers the question the way you want to answer it, which is great. Actually, it gives me like a lot of like thoughts and ideas, and very interesting that idea of creating something that works for parents as well. I know that this is like in education technology where I work. That's always also a challenge because the parents are going to be the gatekeeper, just like for the podcast. In
Yeah.
the car, the parents decide what goes on, at least at the beginning. Then kids can like put a little more pressure if they like the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, being the gatekeeper, you need to do something that works for them as much
Hmm.
as for the kids. And
Yeah.
obviously, kids and parents are like such different or like audience or users or listeners that yeah, it can be challenging. So that's pretty impressive to do a podcast that works for both. Yeah, and something that also I wanted to touch upon is you mentioned for the 4-year old the silliness and how having characters that are silly is something that's going to appeal to them.
Hmm.
Do you think that having silliness is kind of I was going to say mandatory, or like do you need to have some form of silliness if you want to do something that's catchy for young children?
I mean, I don't think that you have to. I'm thinking now about over the summer, I shot these segments for Sesame Workshop for an app. It's called the Begin Learning app. So it was me and Elmo doing these little segments that were specifically teaching emotional literacy. And I mean, I was about to be like, they weren't that silly, but also it's Elmo. So like Elmo's inherently silly. He's a monster. But they're not, it's not like those segments are not built around like comedy. There's like, I would say that they're like really sweet and definitely engaging. I have a friend, I mean, this is what, because I don't have an audience in front of me, right? I like rely on people saying to me, "Oh, we watched that thing and my kid likes it." So I know I have a friend who her 2-year-old will just watch it over and over and over again. And there's definitely a few segments that have comedy built into them, but like the engine that runs on is not humor. Whereas like Wow, Who and Wow does run on an engine of humor, and that is something that TinkerCast, like, there is like like comedy and like we're gonna laugh together as like part of their mission, but it's with integrity. So like I don't think that things have to be like wacky if in order for a kid to like lean in. I think that there is,
Mm.
I really believe that there is room at the table for absolutely everything, because there is a kid that needs to be met with that kind of silliness, and there's a kid that needs to be met with something smaller and like the whole spectrum, and there's a kid that on a Tuesday they want to be like pulling stuff out of a hat and it's like a rubber chicken and like a lampshade and like whatever, and then they want to be like met with some like sweetness and some tenderness at another day at another time. So I think as long as things are done with like an integrity to the audience, they don't have to be silly. For me, a lot of the stuff I end up involved with has silliness to it because that's like a place where I feel very comfortable and I enjoy the rhythms of that. But there's plenty of stuff that's beautiful. I'm thinking of City of Ghosts, the Netflix animated series that is sort of hard to pin down as far as like what age exactly is this for, but it's a show that doesn't use a lot of music as an underscore. The animation is really beautiful, and it is about this like gang of kids. They're like ghost hunters, and they go to different places in Los Angeles and interview the owners of these different, like a restaurant and a museum and a woman who runs like a poetry slam, and they talk to them about the ghost that's like inhabited whatever the place is, and it is like a mix of fiction and nonfiction in a way that is just like outstanding to me as an adult. And I've watched kids watch it, and they watch it differently than something where it's like laughs, laughs, laughs. It's like they're drawn in and they're like, like it's just a different experience. I'm so glad that exists, and I'm so glad that like Yo Gabba Gabba exists.
Nice. And you talk about Sesame, your work with Sesame Street and Sesame Workshop, which kind of leads me to like more of the education part of
Yeah.
what you do. And I'm really, really curious about how you feel education and entertainment can work together and can feed each other.
Yeah. I think we're living in such an amazing time of those things blending together. I mean, I also think like there's education in any piece of entertainment, and to the extent that like you can learn something from like even the worst art. But as far as like working with kids and educational media and like edutainment, I think it's tied into what I was just saying. Like there can be integrity, can be scaffolded into any experience. And I think it's clear what like the education, if you think of the spectrum between education and entertainment, I can kind of imagine what something that is pure education looks like. And even that is going to have elements of it that are like, especially for kids, that are still playful and engaging and entertaining, but you wouldn't call it entertainment, you'd call it education. On the entertainment side, like it's easier to imagine something that has, I guess, no educational value, but it's like just bells and whistles. But even that, like I think, yeah, it's like turning my brain to cheese a little bit, because I mean I want to believe that these things can like swirl together always and forever, that like all great stuff for kids can and should be both educational and entertaining. And that doesn't mean that it has to be like, and now we are learning numbers, but it's fun. Like Bluey, I'm realizing let me know if I need to contextualize anything, because I know that there's like an international reach to the people that you and I play with in some of our sort of educational sandboxes. So I don't want to ever say something that is not given its context. But so the television show Bluey, which is an Australian animated series, and in every episode, it's like the stay-at-home dad, and his two daughters playing. And like, would people call that show educational? Like, to me, that's the best example of like play that I've ever seen in kids television. Like that show is teaching parents how to play, how to feel. It's teaching kids how to play, how to feel. So like, you wouldn't call Bluey an educational show, but you wouldn't call it just like a piece of entertainment either. So I think, okay, maybe I'll say that like the stuff that I like best blurs the line, so you don't even really know. How do you understand that? How do you make sense of that?
Yeah. Well, I prefer to ask the question that answer it, because that's definitely a tough question. But yeah, I think that, as you said, like there needs to be some form of entertainment. I feel there's a problem with getting them too siloed, and I think that's happening a lot when you say this is entertainment, this is education, and a little bit like the way play is not really valued for adults. I feel
Hmm.
when you talk about education, when you start bringing entertainment, you're gonna have a lot of pushback saying, "Oh no, if you're making like too fun, are they really learning?" There's always gonna be that kind of
Yeah.
questioning, and the thing is that learning happens all the time. Like whatever you do, like kids, whatever they do, they're learning something because
Right.
like
Exactly.
just
Exactly.
experiencing the world is learning.
Yeah.
Um, so it's probably like education, like probably the terms themselves are not really
Which is
appropriate. It's not, yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
it's like not education. It's like learning. It's more like learning than education, and it's more
Yeah.
maybe not entertainment, but just playfulness, and that's maybe a little different. So maybe the terms could be changed.
Yeah, or it's just like if like I want to believe that we are students of like the whole world. We're students of our
Hmm.
entire existence. And so like how to refine the lens of like being able to experience anything as educational, like where does that come from? Is it like I experience this as educational because it's meant to be educational, or I experience this as educational because I'm a person that is a student of everything?
Hmm.
Whoa, I don't like. Are we making sense here? I'm like this one. You really got me with this one. People
I
have to
love
give
that.
you feedback. I want to know what other people think about this because I think it's like it's just a little. It's a an interesting spot to like sit and explore.
Yeah, I'll open up the question to people who are listening to this podcast to see what they think about that too. I think it's
Yeah,
definitely
listeners of
an
the world,
interesting
we need you.
conversation. And actually, I want to talk about the more like specific type of learning, which is hands-on learning, because that's something that you're a lot into. Whether it's the Big Fun Crafty Show, that is a like a crafting competition for kids,
Yeah,
or Tube Town, which you say is your favorite project. I loved it too, and it's funny because it happened like I stumbled upon it when I was doing kind of almost the same thing because it was the pandemic. So Tube Town is a live, like interactive show with crafting and storytelling that you were doing on live, like on Facebook Live and Instagram Live during the pandemic.
yeah,
And I remember I was doing some workshop as well, like on Zoom with like crafty activities, because that's something that like kids were missing big
yeah.
time during the pandemic. And so I'm wondering, what's your relationship with hands-on learning? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everything. I think like being able to embody something changes the way that we receive it. And like there are so many things that I like about being able to have your hands working. I mean, we're such a society that's so in our heads, we're on screens, that to be able to make something and like experience the tactile version of play, I think is so useful. And so for Tube Town, the way it worked, it was like a 25 minutes on Instagram Live every Saturday morning, and I'd have a theme, and the kids would the sort of call to arms was save your tubes. So we would take a tube, and or I would take it. I say we as though there were others around. No, it was just me alone in my apartment during the pandemic, surrounded by paper tubes. But I'd pull out a tube, and I'd be like to the audience of kids at home, like how many eyeballs should this tube have? Like what kind of hair should it have? And kids at home would be making along with me. And then, so the first half was like we would kind of work together to build a tube. So if the theme was the beach, we'd build like a surfer dude. And then the second half, I would like do it sort of like an improv show, get suggestions from them, and then have a little like scene work happen. And so what I was hoping to do was model for kids and families like we're going to do this together and then like you can go off and do it yourselves. And it's like the idea that we can make something and that's part one of the play, and then we can play with the thing and that's part two of the play. And I think just like both things, the way I like to try to guide them are so, to me it's like freedom. Like anything can happen, these tubes can be anything. Like I'm saying that we're making a person, but like the person can have 15 eyeballs if we wanted to, and we're gonna laugh about that, and we're gonna expand that into something else. And when I would do the improvised segments, like they're improvised. I didn't plan them ahead of time. So like the set pieces would be like fall. I'd make like a cardboard pirate ship and knock it over halfway through, and like that I know for a fact, even though I couldn't hear them, that kids were laughing at that stuff because it was also just very genuine. But it was also like I was trying to broadcast this idea of like now more than ever during this time when everything is like we are holding it together with like like spit and a dream, like things can be falling apart and we can have fun. So, I mean, I got away a minute from like this question about tactile hands-on learning, but I've also done Tube Town, like creating Tube People with adults as like an opening activity for a like retreat with a media company, and spending like dropping into the beginning of our day together by making Tube People, like opened up the channels of like connection and silliness for that group of adults in a way that I think like building activities have the power to do. So yeah, I've seen Lego do it too, where it's like build the answer to this question with bricks.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah,
It's a different way to like get
totally,
your brain thinking about a problem or an experience.
totally. And I was thinking as you were like talking about it, that maybe one of the things that kids love about Tube Town and kind of like love about what you do in general is seeing an adult like not respecting the rules, like
Totally.
breaking the rules.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's fun because that's not supposed to happen, right? You don't see that
Yeah.
often. So,
And I honestly hope that that is comforting to the parents too. We used to say that all the time on Sunny Side Up. The show was live and stuff would go wrong, and some of that we knew was going to make the kids laugh. But like to be able to show a parent, like, yeah, sometimes it's just like the day doesn't go the way you want it to. Like that's just the truth of living, and I think it's like I feel strongly about like being able to rebrand the experience of failure, of messiness, of mistakes, because that's just part of life. And beautiful things come from really tough, unexpected pivots.
yeah. And building resilience through playfulness is the key, right? It's like if you make a mistake, but it's fun and
Yeah,
you laugh about it rather than being frustrated,
yeah.
and then learn, it makes it easier to learn from that mistake, I feel, yeah. And talking about like Lego Foundation or
Uh-huh.
Sesame Workshop or the Playful Learning Lab, those organizations that you worked with, what did you learn from working with them and seeing how they approach that space?
Yeah, so when I got connected with the Lego Foundation to do their 2020 Ideas Conference, to host it, it was my entry point into the sort of academic world of play. I kind of like fell into that position, that role for that conference. And as I was getting onboarded and like getting all the research papers and everything, and I guess I had some experience with some of the research from Sunny Side Up, but to be dropped in through Lego, I was like, oh, right. This is the research version of the stuff that I embody in my everyday work. Like, this is like the style of stuff of the work that I make. This is the, like, I share the mission, like the 5 principles of learning through play that Lego, puts out into the world. Like, I see those and understand those in the field. So it was so satisfying to start working with Lego and to feel like it helped me feel this like sense of legitimacy, I think, to be like, I do
Yeah.
this thing with my life that like some people can be like, that is absurd. That is an absurd life you're living. But I'm like, no, actually, if you look at the Lego Foundation, they're doing research to prove that this is essential, if not life-saving. And like, it's so important. And I think I always believed in my heart that this work is important and transformative around play, and to connect with Lego and then to be open up to this wider world of other people that are like really doing the work to understand how important it is and how to do it best. It was really like validating and satisfying and gave me like a whole new world of collaborators and mentors and people to be inspired by. And then it like feeds the work I do for television and podcasts, because I can walk into a pitch and be like, here's why I think this thing works, and here's the research to back it up, because I can
Hmm.
pull in stuff I've, picked up along the way from my intelligent colleagues.
Yeah, that's so important to have this bridge between the research and the
Hmm.
application of it. I love that. And I'm curious if we have like educators listening, what would be some like tips or advice from what you learned, like both through your work and from that research, for ways to introduce more play in the classroom? I know that a lot of them, they want to have that, but it's
Hmm.
difficult because of a lack of time and resources.
Yeah.
And what are some like easy ways that they could maybe introduce more of that?
Yeah. I mean, from like a sort of tactile or like tangible resources place, I do feel like the Lego Foundation has good resources for like games and like learning through play in the classroom and like have like hard and fast tips about it. But I think just like in general, I think there's like a presence to play that like so many little moments can be made playful by being present with a mistake or present with delight, like noticing something that kids are laughing at or enjoying and then like building on that. I think our places to try to like locate, okay, where can I expand this moment into something more playful? Also, I think transitions can be a great way to incorporate play. Literally, I feel like I keep seeing this on TikTok, like teachers that are using like a song or gestures or some sort of ritual to get into a math lesson or something. And it's like, it's only going to be like a minute anyway of your day. And so if you make it into something playable or gamify it or make it into some sort of ritual, it can just add a little bit of texture and flavor and like delight to something that you got to do anyway. So, but like stuff like that, yeah, transitions or like opening, starting the day, closing the day can really help.
Yeah, I love that. Especially since if you start a ritual, then you have some work to like get it started. But once it becomes a habit and a ritual, then it just feeds itself, right? You don't have that
Yeah,
much like more work
like
to do. It's there, right?
yeah. Like those teachers that like, I mean, for younger kids, that when the kids come into the classroom, there's like a handshake. I feel like those get a lot of traction on TikTok and Instagram
Yeah, I've
Reels.
seen some of
And
them. Yeah.
and it's such a great way to ground the day in play. And specifically the ones that I've seen are like each kid has their own different hand sign. And so it's like grounding the day in play and like agency, which is nice too. Like how is each kid personally showing up in the spirit of play that makes sense for them?
Yeah, I love that. And there's another element of like another skill that you have that I'm also interested in, and see how it could apply to teachers, which is improv. 'Cause you've done a lot of improv, and I've done a little bit of improv, but I know there's like some rules that could be very useful for educators in
Yeah.
their day-to-day like lives. And I wonder if you can like share maybe some tips coming from improv.
Definitely. I mean, the easiest and like best tip is the concept of yes and, which in improv, if you're doing a scene with somebody, there's this very like kind of fundamental principle of the idea of yes and, which is let's say you and I are doing a scene together and I'm like, "Hey, like let's get in the car." Instead of being like, "What car?" You're like, "Yes, I would love to get in the car." And I'll say like, "Let's go to the beach." And instead of being like, "Well, no, I don't want to go to the beach." I'd be like, "Yeah, let's go to the beach and eat French fries." And then you're like, "Yeah, French fries with 16 different types of mustard." And you're like, "Yeah, we love mustard. We're the mustard crew," or whatever. So it's just building and building. It's agreeing and building. And I think that is, I mean, first of all, teachers are improvising all day, but the idea of building on something in agreement is a really like not even just like it doesn't mean like if a kid says something you say yes and expand it, but like meeting your students where they are and like and growing with them together. I think in like a more kind of meta way, like there's so many ways to yes and something that's happening in a classroom instead of trying to like deny a reality basically. And then I think like the work that I've done improv has been through classes and playing on teams, and it's such an amazing muscle to work because you get out on stage, you don't know what's going to happen. You have to trust the people you're playing with, you have to trust yourself, and mistakes will be made. But with the safety of the team and the imagination, like actually everything is probably going to be okay. But I notice when I'm in a point in my life where I'm getting really uncertain about when I notice that I feel fear around uncertainty around work or like my personal life, a lot of times I will get myself into an improv class to just kind of like play at that edge and like remember I can like build the muscle around facing uncertainty. But just to give another example of like in improv, if there's, let's say you and I are talking about something and I mean to say hamburger, but I say schmamburger. I made a mistake. Like I guess that'd be like a really intense mistake to make. But like if I say the wrong word, instead of us just like pretending like it didn't happen, if you're a good teammate, you're gonna be like, I'm so glad you finally are interested in the burger company that I've been trying to start or whatever. Like, how do you take that mistake and actually turn it into a gift? And I think that, I mean, teachers are doing that, I think, all day long, trying to like pivot and make magic out of something that might be not going the way that you want it to go. Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely one of the jobs that requires the most improvisation
Yeah.
every day. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's a concept that you talk about on your website, and I'll share your website at the end of the episode and in
Oh,
the
thanks. Great.
description of the podcast as well.
Great.
But you say, in all that I do, I create the conditions for people of all ages to connect to their bounce. So
Yeah.
what's the bounce?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I was trying to figure out as I was becoming freelance, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, what is the mission, and how am I going to decide what kind of projects I take or what kind of work I do when I do so many different types of things? And I actually, with Meredith Halpern Ranzer, who runs TinkerCast, she and I were like jamming on it, and she helped me kind of locate this feeling that I named bounce, this idea of bounce, which is like the rhythm of collaboration. You know, if you and I are talking about something and jamming on something, we're bouncing. If I'm showing up to a space of my own like solo creative generation, like if I'm trying to write my book, I can get into a flow state where I'm bouncing. So I think it shares DNA with like flow state or other kind of feelings of creative connectivity. But I like to think in all the work that I do, I'm helping people connect to whatever that is for them. So whatever that rhythm is of like personal creativity and freedom and wonder and connectedness, like I hope that I'm offering a place to just like expand that. Yeah. I think
Awesome.
I say it,
Let's
I'm not saying
bounce.
it on my website, but bounce.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I have like a last question that I really like to ask to all the guests on the podcast, which is,
Okay.
if you could design a school around one thing, and it could be a physical thing, it can be a concept, it can be anything, why would it be and why?
I think if I could design a school around like a principle or a spirit of some kind, I mean, I think it really would be play. Like, what would it look like to build something, you know, for all ages that centers on exploration in a way that is not super tightly controlled, but that offers students the chance to explore who they are, what they believe, what they think their superpowers are, what lights them up. Yeah. And I think there are different places that kind of thread that through, and different pedagogies and different people who share that mission. So I think probably the thing that I imagine is a version of a few things that already exist, and it's a place where people are connected and it's intergenerational. Like kids are working with different age groups all the time, and it's just like magic and beautiful and basically awesome.
Yeah.
Such a good question and such a hard question. Like I almost feel like
I know.
humbled and not qualified to answer. Like what I want to do, I'll tell you what, I want to join a team of people I admire, and you can come. There, I can think of like 50 people I want to come. Wait, this is my new answer to the question. Okay, I found it. I want to design a school that is the 20 smartest, most amazing people that I know getting together to then design a school. That's my answer.
That's awesome. Well, I would love to see what school comes out of it.
Well, you're going to be working on it, so you better get some sleep, because we're not going to sleep once it starts. We're going to be very tired. It's going to be very intense. It's going to be worth it.
That's, I mean, I could take your word for it because it sounds like a cool project.
It'll be
I
so
would
fun.
definitely
Oh my
love to
gosh.
work on that.
Yeah, everyone, so many people are going to be there. It's going to be great. Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Callie. It was wonderful having this
Thank you.
conversation. There's
Thank
still so
you.
many things I would love to talk about, but in the interest of time, we're going to end here by asking you where can we find more more things about your work or
Yeah.
contact you.
So I try to keep my website pretty updated. www.carly, C-A-R-L-Y, Ciarrocchi, Ciarrocchi.com. And my Instagram is Carly at Carly Ciarrocchi, and I try to post less so on the grid, but on my stories I do try to post about like stuff that's going on. Yeah, I think the website is probably the spot for now. At some point, I'm going to get like a newsletter together because there are just so many different types of things kind of going out all the time. But for right now, yeah, website and Instagram.
Awesome. I share all those links in the details of the podcast.
Thank you so
Before we stop, I almost forgot to ask. I saw that you are currently pitching Tube Town as a TV series.
So yeah. Okay, it's so interesting that you asked me that because I just feel like this whole thing is right up your alley. So I have pitched it around. I pitched it around a little bit like a few months ago, and then revisited it again with a production company to change some things. It's been very difficult for me to figure out how exactly to adapt it. Like I keep changing, like the version that I pitched a few months ago will not be the next version that I pitch because the thing that made Tubetown so special during the pandemic was the live interaction of it. So I have been visioning it out as a few potentially other things, including possibly a stage show instead of a television show. And I'm just going to leave you with this one image because it hasn't been, it's like really in an early stage and I don't want to speak too much about it. But like a vision that we have is that just like 200 cardboard tubes drop from the ceiling at like from the stage, like at the beginning of the show. And then it's like, it's building tube people, it's interactive, the audience is involved. So Tubetown, like, the pandemic is not the last that you will see of Tubetown. And whether it's a traditional television show or something that feels more like a multi-dimensional project, 2024 is going to hopefully have all of those answers and more.
I can't wait. Save your tubes, people. You're going to need them.
Save them. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for some of my technical difficulties. This was such a pleasure. You are just like such a bright light in the world of the thing that we do. And I'm so glad that we're connected.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm very happy that people will get to like hear about all this advice and this amazing stuff that you're working on. So thank you, Callie.
Hello, new
Have a
friends
nice
of the
rest of your
world.
day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye.